Hello everybody and welcome to this final episode of Activist Lawyer, the final in the series, and I'm delighted to be joined by Mr. Jonathan McKeown. Welcome to the studio, Jonathan.
Thank you very much, Sarah. We're very welcome to be here.
Great. A place you know quite well. So we'll get to that in a little bit, but just by way of introduction, I'm going to introduce our listeners to you, Jonathan. A bit of background as well, just to get us to your career to date. Jonathan graduated with a degree in aeronautical engineering and a degree in legal science from Queen's University, Belfast. Gosh, two very, very different career paths there. In between, he also studied business administration for a year in Sheldon Jackson College in Alaska. As founder and chairman of JMK, Jonathan's focus is ensuring that the firm maintains its position as the leading personal injury practice in Northern Ireland. His hope is to instill a culture of innovation and very high standards of client care in this new generation of staff in the company. Jonathan's been involved in many important cases that have set binding precedents that have ensured the rights of accident victims are protected. He views this as his most important achievement of his career so far and something he hopes to continue for the rest of it. Now, Jonathan has several other business interests. Most notably, he is the owner of Crash Services and is also the owner of a co-working and serviced office business called Granite Exchange, which also houses our lovely studio here, the Granite Podcast Studio. And he produces the Public Eye podcast and the Activist Lawyer podcast, which many people may not know your involvement in this because we haven't had you on before.
Well, I think I'd probably try to keep myself as a facilitator of other people, making sure things happen. You know, I have great ideas, but you need people like yourself to implement them.
Well, that's where we're going to get to today. So we're going to talk about a little bit about your career to date and your journey, because that's really interesting that you started off in a very, very different route. And then, of course, your other business interests. And people might not be familiar with the Public Eye podcast is one that focuses on NI businesses, isn't it? So that's a really popular podcast as well. Also recorded here at our lovely studio. So why don't you take us through, I suppose, going back in time a little bit, not too far.
I think you've done quite well summing me up there. Well, thank you very much, Sarah. Well, I think to explain why I did engineering, that was really from my GCSE time. I had done average, shall we say, and I got 2 A's in my GCSEs. One was in maths and one was in history, and I really should have stuck at the history and that type of subject, but for some bizarre reason I did maths, physics and chemistry, and do not know why I did it. I took the head staggers, and then that kind of limited where I was going, and grades wise I was never going to have enough grades to get in to do law, which was what I was always interested in, and it was just one of those things you just think you just do the wrong thing and then you're on a different path. So I did the engineering at Queen's, loved it. It was aeronautical engineering. It was great time. I've got very close friends from those days even now, and I was fortunate enough in my final year to be able to go to study in America as part of a training and employment agency, as it was called, scheme called the Business Education Initiative, which was aimed at, it was sort of slightly cross-community in that what they tried to do was send 2 students to a number of colleges in America to study for a year, one from each of the communities in Northern Ireland, and as well as proving that that there was, that we could get along peacefully if we weren't in this country. Also, it allowed the opportunity to learn other subjects which weren't business and things like that, and law weren't what we were doing in engineering. So I came back then and studied, as you mentioned, the course in Queen's, and then got qualified as a solicitor, finally qualifying in 2001.
Okay.
So it was really because law was what I was interested in, but I didn't have the grades. But having had an undergrad degree, it meant I could get into a postgrad in law.
So that was the path.
That was the path.
Very
so
good.
it was a long time. I think my entire 20s nearly were taken up with
Studying.
Education. Yes. My Christmases were ruined because
Did you get burnout? I could just envisage that coming to a period where you're just like, no more.
Well, it was great whenever I didn't have to worry about over Christmas with having exams in January. It was definitely a big improvement.
And then what took you into personal injury law? Was that the first kind of area you went into?
Well, that was it. It wasn't what I wanted to go into, but interestingly, in terms of what we'll get on to talk about later, I hope, about activism, I did have a brief experience when I was in Alaska of helping out in the legal department of the local tribe, Native American tribe, that they had various legal issues that they wanted to, that they had to deal with, and one of which I helped out on was when they were trying to figure out a strategy of how to deal with increasing fishing quotas, because they were afraid that this was depleting and would have long-term damage. So that was the first experience I had in that type of thing, but it was more about problem solving. That was really where I saw my interests in the law. It didn't matter what kind of law, but as happenstance and bad luck, is that what Bill Nye says in Love Actually? I ended up falling into personal injury law, and it wasn't what I had intended to do. It wasn't particularly, I enjoyed it because there was problem solving aspects to what I was doing, but I thought that I could have put my hand to anything, and I did try to get away from it, believe it or not, because I thought that again, didn't know enough about it really, I suppose, in terms of, but you had this impression of personal injury law that it was grubby, it was, it was all about money, and that, that you'd hear this phrase, oh, personal injury claim money is bad luck money, things like that, all these things that people said, and you end up feeling a bit self-conscious about the whole thing. But as a result of my inability to get a job anywhere else, I was forced to open up my own practice because I couldn't get a job anywhere else. I've been turned down from some of the best places, but I think that the aspect of the personal injury claim is, I suppose, it ties into what we talk about activism and how you're, when you're trying to do positive things, I suppose when you're being rubbished, that's how you're doing the positive thing. Yeah. But it was my intention then when I started the practice with that specialism to branch out, and we started the practice in 2003, and we were really getting going and doing well just in time for the credit crunch, and we were only starting to pick up business in the wider range of legal services, and then the credit crunch came and everything stopped, and we had a terrible few years reorganising the practice. We had to downsize. We ended up halving the practice, and whilst I don't know, embarrassment or shame, I don't know those right words, but I don't think I don't feel ashamed about what happened, but I am, embarrassed about it and feel a bit of guilt about the people that we had to let go.
Sure.
It was nothing. It was none of their fault. I had made some naive steps, and it all came back to bite. Hence why we had to stop and regroup within the practice. So one of the important things that we started off doing then in around 2011 was creating the mission and vision for the practice, and then the core values. So those were very important to get the staff involved in that, to reorganise and think about, well, what are we actually doing? And I suppose it was around that time that we decided to specialise in the personal injury law side of things, and to accept that we were personal injury lawyers, we were good at it, and the public deserved good service, good personal injury lawyers, and people who were proud of what they were doing. And that was really where we came around with the mission of the practice, to proudly serve people, because that was what I thought was had been wrong in my own thinking before that time, in that I was I didn't really know what I wanted or what I was doing, but that was that crunch. You
find that area, so that it led to that kind of awakening, I suppose, in some way. And now, of course, you've grown quite massively. You've opened up recently in Derry, and
that's right. I mean, that's great. I mean, it was one of the things that I was I had thought about doing in the early days, is opening a chain of offices and having them everywhere. But again, naivety. It's not that straightforward. You think you can do all of these things, but you really can't. You need experience. You need people around you, and everybody needs time to learn. So it's so we're nearly 20 years. We're into our 20th year now, and we have been the largest personal injury practice in Northern Ireland for the last 8 years. Hopefully we can keep that going for 10. Until we get to 10.
That's an amazing achievement. But also, as you mentioned, people maybe had an image of personal injury lawyers, and perhaps that image persists in some way. But you have been involved in a lot of advocacy work as well within the personal injury area of law. So,
but I think it's important. One of the things when I was studying law, one of the things, obviously, you've done it yourself. You know what in every law class you get cases to read.
Yeah.
I think there was, my brother had been at university a couple of years ahead of me, and one of his friends' father had been involved in a case, which he mentioned to me at the time. And whatever, 5-6 years later, I was then reading about this case when I went to Queen's, and it's an important precedent even now in contract law. And I think that probably was formative in my idea that if you're in the law, you should be creating case law. Mm-hmm. That if you're just going along with what's already there, you're not making any improvement, you're not making any advancement. Mm-hmm. And in the family, we also have an experience of two experiences in the law going back several decades, when I have an aunt and uncle, or great aunt and uncle, who went to America, and they had a very unfortunate incident with their pet dog, which died on the train. And it created a precedent in America which stood for about 30 years, because it was my aunt had signed it was my aunt's dog, but her husband had signed the ticket which said that there was no liability from the train company. So it created a good contractual point. And my great uncle had studied law for several years. Because he couldn't get a lawyer, he had to fight the case himself. But created a precedent.
Amazing.
And in the personal injury world, something which I didn't even realise until I was practising a number of years, is that my grandfather had actually one of the rare cases. He'd had a personal injury claim in Northern Ireland that went to the House of Lords. As well, so it was it wasn't not quite a precedent, but it was still an important case on on the law. And in personal injury. So there seems to have been family history and litigation. But definitely it was precedents. That's the thing for me. That was what was important. And I'm very I know one of my things is pride before a fall. Don't get too cocky. But I am always delighted when we have a new precedent, or we have some piece of case law that we can then point others to say, well, there's the standard. Look what we're pushing for. Look, these are the improvements in people's lives. This is the clarity that we're bringing to this area of law.
And important improvements, because most of us are, our family members will at one point suffer, or have to go to a solicitor for personal injury. And I know there were children's cases that you were working on as well recently.
The children's cases are important. I think in Northern Ireland, we have this statistic that there is something like 20% underfunding of mental health services, but 25% higher propensity for mental health issues compared with the rest of the UK, and that affects children more so than you would expect. There is this concept of the psychological trauma that's passed down through generations, and that we've had in Northern Ireland. And I think there's it's easy to forget when we're 20 years supposedly from the Good Friday Agreement and moving forward, that actually our lives have been touched by the Troubles. And even though I was born in one of the worst years of the Troubles, I obviously was too young to appreciate it, but lived through lots of traumatic experiences, and things which tragedies live on TV, for example. Those are things which at those times, those were powerful impacts. I appreciate now they're you don't forget them though. You don't forget them, and they're up, but they're becoming very common to see all these things, and it's almost like a weird voyeurism that people want to see tragedies, but at the time it was utterly shocking. And I think that those traumas that are visited upon the parents who visit them upon their children without even realising, and then when you have children who have accidents and injuries, they are affected greater than you would expect as a result of that. And that was one of the things we're trying to highlight. That we're also trying to highlight the practices of insurance companies trying to deal with people who are injured without legal representation, especially children. Adults, they have to take the responsibility for their own actions, I suppose. But we're trying to point out that the insurers should be more careful in how they deal with people, because not everybody is as capable of dealing with things as everyone else. But especially when it comes to children, that's something we've been lobbying for a long time on. Now we are hopeful that in 2023, if the executive gets back up and running, that it'll be one of the first laws that is brought into place. And that would be a massive achievement. As my colleague Maurice Hutchinson in JMK Solicitors, who has been leading that for the last number of years. I sort of started it, another project that I started and got someone else to take on, but Maurice feels very strongly about it. And I think it'll be whilst I initially started gathering the data, it was really Maurice's skills and ability that have pushed that on. Brilliant. And the relentlessness of making sure that it didn't get forgotten about. So when we have mandatory court settlements of personal injury claims for minors, that will be the next greatest achievement in my career.
That's fantastic. It really is. And of course we had Maurice on a while back talking about the details of that case. So really, really fantastic work that not many people might associate with what's going on in a personal injury practice, but really pushing forward on those changes and advocacy.
Well, I think that's one of the things is that we, as lawyers, we get into this. We're painted into this thing of you're just the rich fat cats who don't care, who only care about their fees, and that's a good narrative for the media to push all the time. And the public, it's easy to say it. It's like fat cat banker or fat cat lawyer. It's it is something which. It becomes easy for people to remember those words and remember that, and then that colours their entire view. So I think it's one of the things when we were lobbying for the new legislation. Some of the officials have said that it is refreshing for lawyers to come not begging for extra money, which is
not to make that real change.
Make change, exactly.
Absolutely.
So.
And on that point, just about colouring lawyers and the media and the press, we're well used to that. Activist lawyer. That came around 2020, wasn't it? Towards the end of 2020, you and I are sitting in a room here in our lovely building having a chat, and we did not think, I did not think that we'd be here, 2 years later.
Oh, it's fantastic. As I say, we're celebrating, we've obviously had the 50 episodes now at this stage, but I think it was something which I had for a long time in my mind, and I had it as a, those magnets you get for the fridge. I have a couple of those with from a trip to Stratford upon Avon many years ago. That has the Shakespearean quote: "First thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers." And it's something which we have when we did a review of the business. It was one of the things that I mentioned earlier. It was one of the things that I started the review with. Is this idea that people think that Shakespeare meant we must get rid of lawyers, when obviously he's a dramatist and he was using that as part of the drama, and he was making a point that the characters wanted to overthrow society, and the way to do it is to get rid of the lawyers. And it's amazing how many changes in the law have been brought about by the public not realising that the people who are acting in their best interests are the ones being sidelined. I'm often fond of quoting Napoleonic quotes as well. He is, men will fight harder for their interests and their rights. And that's something which I regularly point to, that that when you see people complaining about, for example, the new legislation about anti-protesting, for example, as if, and you have people lauding that as if that's a great thing to ban protests. And none of the changes that would have came about without protests. You look at we're just over the 100th anniversary of women getting the vote, for example, which wouldn't have come about without people sacrificing themselves. And so you've got all this narrative, this anti-lawyer narrative, and at that particular time, because of your own interest in immigration, I was becoming more interested in immigration issues, and I was. I think it was around about the August time, if you remember that year, it was the things that were put out by the Home Office slagging off activist lawyers and lefty lawyers and all this sort of thing. And what I thought was, if that's the phrase they're going to use, what you have to do is to own the phrase, be proud of it, and stop them using it. Because whenever they say it as a put down, if we could turn it around into saying, I am an activist lawyer, you're absolutely right. And isn't it
own
great?
it, yeah.
And own it, exactly, as you say. So that was where we came about. So
That's
I
right, yeah.
quickly registered the website.
As you do.
And,
You're on the ball.
and,
Nobody can accuse you of not being on the ball.
And thought, right, Boris, I suppose
Boris,
then.
yeah.
And, but I think the thing is, it's I think it's hard. I think it's easy to slate politicians in the same way. I think that's the thing that on the if you say it like the non-right wing, I'll say, I'm not going to say lefty, but the non-left wing side don't stoop to the tactics that the extremists on the right do. I think that's the problem, that we're more circumspect. Because we believe it's dishonourable to do that, and we're always on the back foot in these things. So I think that was what the intention at that time was, to say, right, we'll take back the phrase and we will use it, and we'll say, yeah, we are activist lawyers, and that's not something to be ashamed of. And I think that in terms of the podcast, what I've liked about the whole concept and the thing that's happened is that people have warmed to the idea of having time to talk about the issues that they're involved in.
Yeah.
That they have an outlet now for that, and we're building a wee community around that idea.
It's been lovely to see that, and like a platform just for people to share their work together. And I guess, as you said to me before in a few discussions we've had, you've this mindset that maybe people are competing against each other and firms are, but really we've seen a lot of people who've been on our podcast know each other or have an interest in their colleagues' work, even though they don't work in the same firm. So it's been a really good platform just in terms of sharing the work of
Well, I think that's
lawyers.
right. Is that in high street legal practice, it's very competitive. I suppose that people are fighting with each other for clients, and I think in this type of work, in human rights and activism generally, it tends to be people who care more about the work than they do about the income that's generated from it.
Absolutely.
Obviously, they require to earn a living to be able to continue to do the work, but they don't seem to be as as competitive at that side. It's like they're if there's enough issues for them all to deal with, and they're proud of their colleagues who are also making advancements. So I think it seems to be a bit more collegiate.
I think you're right. Yeah, absolutely. And just as a means of communication, I guess, you're interested in podcasts in general. I know that, and you'd be a fan of them for going back many, many years, all sorts. How do you feel we're moving in terms of using this medium as a means of communication with maybe people who don't really know about human rights or public interest law or any type of law?
Well, I think it's a bit like what we did with the public eye on the business side of things, which is another interest of mine. It's trying to create the database, I suppose, of the interviews and things that people can look back on, because there really isn't, unless you're high profile, there isn't opportunities to be interviewed and to have your words kept for posterity, if you like, and I think that's where the importance of it becomes. The other phrase that was bandied about in that year of activist lawyer was the loudmouth lawyer, and
that's
I did register that website too, and I have a wee podcast series myself, which unfortunately due to other commitments I've left withering on the vine, but I have to get back to that in the new year. And really what it was about was I suppose trying to tell little anecdotes or of my own experience, but to show how values and things could be extrapolated from those experiences, because we're in a world that's we're so pressured, and every issue is this phrase, this wedge issue. It's like you can't have a middle ground anymore. You have to have a divisive. You have to be one side or the other, and I think that causes so many problems. And you look at so many times your own emotions are whipped up by the media, and then you go, why do I even care about that? Yeah.
And we do. I mean, a lot, like we would have discussions even just about the themes at the time, and a lot of the narrative that has been, has been fueled by whoever's in politics or at that time, whoever's in government, whatever crisis is going on at that time. What do you think the relationship is between, I guess, the themes that we're talking about on this particular podcast and others like it, and politics very much is an interaction between the two.
Well, I think it's this thing is an awful lot of the time you think you have to have a big gesture. I think that's the problem, and it is the small changes that make the difference, and it's about constant small changes and incremental. Because there's so much weight on the other side that all you can do is make small changes. It's you know, the random acts of kindness that you hear about. It's that kind of thing. Is it that the little things make the big difference?
Sure,
and that I think that's where, in terms of keeping the podcast growing, in terms of people's awareness of it, it's about starting it and then keeping it going so that it doesn't go off and people lose what was put into it. It's like once it's started, we have to keep building and building, and it will take time. But that's the mission of it. So it's an avenue to build awareness, and I think again. I don't want to say proud, but it's one of the things that we learned, if you remember, was that one of the universities was using the podcast as an inspiration and part of the reading list. Yeah.
Delighted. I couldn't believe it. And we've reached out to other third level institutes as well, because a lot of our listeners would be students who are contemplating, getting into law. And some of the feedback that we've received have been from students who say, we hear a lot about the commercial firms and a lot about, those areas of practice, but you don't really hear so much about how you would get opportunities within, public interest law or the human rights realm. So it's good to know people are listening in and hearing real journeys and real, people have been so candid on this podcast and of really talking about their experience, bad or good, leading them to their, position of a lawyer or solicitor, barrister, whatever it might be, which has been really eye-opening.
Yes, well, I think you're right about the commercialisation of the universities has created that dynamic that the commercial world is the place to go, and I had that same desire, but from watching TV and things like that, it was
what was it then? Was it Ali McBeal?
Probably Ali McBeal. I'm old enough to know LA Law, or as somebody said, it was a French show, LA or La Law. Somebody said, so I think that those things do push you in thinking that those are the things that are important. But I think again, it's cultural. In Northern Ireland, it has that history of activism, and I think people in the law, they want to make a difference. And I think the last thing you want to hear as an idealistic person is yes, you can become a lawyer and fill in forms for Companies House. That's not what you sign up to the law to do. Sure. So.
Yeah, we've had a good range of different guests, I suppose, who've covered a wide area, but we still lots more that we could cover. Is there anything that you would?
Well, I think it is. I mean, some of the guests that again, it was things that people who you maybe have heard of but didn't know what they were actually doing, which is great. And I think. I think, for example, Rosemary Connolly was one of the early guests, who was very, tenacious employment and human rights lawyer, and I think employment rights is a big issue that we're, especially post Brexit. Do we have to bleep that word out? We should
no, it's been said on this show many times. The B word. You can keep it in.
But you can see that's what that's what Brexit is really about. Is about eroding rights and including employment rights. So I think Rosemary could be very busy for another 20 years, dealing with the issues that are coming down the line. But she was an inspirational character. Yeah. But also Dara Mackin, who's young solicitor and much more insightful and knowledgeable than I was at the same age, as was a recent guest.
Owen Beatty.
Owen Beatty, what he called was, just started his practice at similar age to myself, I think, but he seems worldly wise, a lot wiser than I was, and a lot savvier. So it's good to see those things that my perception of young lawyers is that it's all about the corporate law. Yeah. But actually, to see young people who are, say, they've got a lot more gravitas than I ever had, and are really pushing it, pushing their themselves and their practices. And I think Padraig O'Murray was another one of the shows.
Yes, that's right. Last year,
he had a brilliant answer to the question about how do you distance yourself and keep the professional relationship.
That's right.
And I'm paraphrasing, but he effectively said, well, he doesn't. Why would you? You know, and I think that's right. Is that you know, to some extent, that, you know, I would say that's the barrister's job in case just to keep the distance. But it's the solicitor's job to actually be indignant on behalf of the client. That would be one of my things that I regularly say to our people is be indignant. You know, don't put up with the abuse. You know, because you're there to, you know, to you're not leading them the wrong way. You're saying, I know what you should be getting here. I know what you should expect. This is not it, and I'm going to make sure you get it. And that you feel passionately about that. You know, solicitors who say, I'm not the client's friend. Well, what are you doing there then? Because they need their best friend. They need the person who can tell it to them straight, and you know, and you have to feel that you're not going to let them down. That you wouldn't let a friend down, you're not going to let a client down. That's the different relationship as a solicitor. They're
there in times of crisis usually, you know, and I guess the range of guests that we've had on have given us great detail about some of the real heavy hitting cases, particularly those coming out of the Troubles and legacy cases here as well. So it's just been so inspiring to hear on the ground how it works and the relationships that they do develop with clients and the wider family. How could they not, you know? And it's,
but I think it is great when you see you know, someone who has a great case and they get a bit of publicity about it, and you go, oh, that's fantastic, brilliant. And you know, I think it's I think that's, I suppose, inspiring for the next generation coming through, is that you can say, well, actually, those are the leaders, those are the people that that we should be looking up to.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And then for the year ahead, so this is our final episode of 2022 and some ideas for 2023. I think one area that seems to be emerging that we haven't really covered in great detail would be environmental justice as well. And there's lots of planning issues that seem to be cropping up as well, tied into that. What other areas or themes would you like to see maybe for the year ahead?
Well, I think it's I think this. I don't want to say it's a cliche, the cost of living, but it's another one of the things that we all just go cost of living. But I think that's one that is seeing how we can explain how these things have all come about, and how you know, as part of the overall manipulation of things that are going on, and we really don't know anymore what's happening, and you know, the activism, I think, is, you know, and you mentioned earlier about intervention with or interaction with politics. I think we have to look wider than just, you know, basic legal issues. And you say environment is a big issue, and it's something which, again, we just need to make incremental changes and push for. But it's the thing shining the light on these areas, things that we just don't know. That's what I would really like to look for, is what issues are going on that don't get into the media.
Exactly.
And that it's important to see actually someone is taking steps to do that. There was an interesting case. I'm obviously originally from the Craigavon, Lurgan area, so there was an interesting judicial review this year in relation to a planning approval for a new campus for the Southern Regional College on the lakes on the banks of the lakes in Craigavon, and I think the lady was called McKeown. I think I'd like to get her on. So maybe this is a call out to Mrs. McKeown to come because you know, I knew obviously from that, being from that area, I knew the issue was going on. I knew people were concerned about it, and you know, and it's what's interesting that in that your initial view as an outsider would be actually the SRC deserves a fantastic new campus. That would be brilliant. And you think, well, if you've got the space, your mind would go to say, oh, that's brilliant. You're absolutely good. You've got the money to do it. Look at how fancy the swimming pool is down there now on the lakes, where I nearly drowned a number of years ago. But you look at that, but if you don't know what the issues are, then you don't have any appreciation for what Mrs. McKeown and her legal team went through to overturn that, and why they thought it was so important to overturn it. And I think that's the, you know, when you talk about planning rules and things like that, is like it is easy to see investment as the be all and end all, without realising that you have to have managed investment and development,
Yeah.
and things which just because you don't know about it doesn't mean it's not important. I think that's the thing. Is
It was great to read that, and just the success of that was really something that would make great change in the area in general. But it's, as you said, it's can you take those small steps that really make seismic changes as well. And I know that case was shared on social media and was celebrated, so it would be definitely one that we could.
But what's interesting is that I could be wrong on this, but I didn't see too many politicians in favour of her.
No.
And that's the thing, is there's someone who stood up to all of that pressure. And there was a campaign group and got the grassroots support, and those are inspirational stories. Those are what you want to see, that the things are going on, and because they're things that I just wouldn't. You wouldn't know about it otherwise. You wouldn't.
That's a good point. And then just, I suppose, outside of your own legal work and all of your other business interests that you have going on, what area of the law would interest you? Or is there any area that you may have liked to have practiced in, or?
Well, I suppose everybody who's in the law wants to be the best criminal defence lawyer that
is that from watching too much La Law?
Exactly. So, and I sort of do have that. Every so often I think about the Innocence Project. And I think, God, I'd love to to do that. You sort of imagine in Northern Ireland that maybe there's not a need for it. That it's well served.
It's well covered.
But I don't know. But I say I don't know. And but you sort of that's the sort of thing I think that would interest me, because in the law you have to be interested in reading. That's you can't just read headlines. You've got to go beyond that
detail.
And I think it is it's a common joke in the as you're an undergrad law student, that you got to just read the head notes. You don't read the actual cases. But when you read the cases, that's where you see the detail. That's where you see the points, and that's where you develop your strategies. And most people don't read, so that's a problem. So I sort of feel that it's something that I might try to. We're coming out of the pandemic, and there's freer travel and things. Is maybe try to get involved in that. Take the time or take a summer to read cases, to read in depth. Into the actual detail of a case, and try to see what help you can provide to it. Because I think it's back to what I said about my real interest in the law was about problem solving, that I can always come up with ideas, and those are the those types of cases which could make a real difference to people's lives.
A huge difference. I mean, the injustice. A lot of podcasts cover, especially the American cases. Even Kim Kardashian now has her own podcast covering them. So they're widely covered. But I always listen to them, and at the end you're just so frustrated that the answer was there, yet somebody has just served 20 years on death row or whatever it might be. So but that would be great if you could.
We'll do that. Do a podcast.
I'll help you.
We'll find a case, but I think it's. I think that's just something as I'm getting into sort of getting older, and I'm not quite 50 yet, but I feel like I'm getting older.
I'm not quite 50.
But you do feel that you have to move on. But I think we've got in JMK we've got a fantastic team of people. I mentioned Maurice earlier, who is. Very, very tenacious, very detail orientated, which something I'm not good on, and Olivia Meehan, who's their legal services director. The two of those lead the practice in a fantastic way. They've got two different personalities as well, and Olivia is very much the sunshine. We're in the darkness. She's. I think maybe Maurice is dusk and dawn.
Are you listening, Maurice?
Maurice can traverse the dark and the good and the light.
But everything's in good hands.
It's absolutely so. And I think that's where I'm feeling. Well, if I'm the darkness, then I need to move on. Let them have a lot more light
in the darkness. I'm sure they wouldn't agree with that. But that would be fantastic. I mean, if you could, garner that.
But I think it's being very lucky in terms of being able to move and be able to have options.
Sure.
And I think the staff are in a good position. We've a great team now. Yeah. We've built a lot in the pandemic. We've made a lot of changes to terms and conditions of employment. Making everything better, or as better as we can make it, as good as we can make it, and that then allows you to move on to do other things. But I think we've got to make sure they continue to be inspired and follow the core values, mission and vision as to what they're doing in the personal injury world, and then I can look at other things.
Excellent. So lots of positive changes coming out of the pandemic there, and just I suppose moving on in terms of activism as well. I think we've asked a couple of guests this, but just in terms of inspiration, is there anybody, that stands out for you in the legal world in terms of?
Well, I think is that when you're based in Northern Ireland, it is, as you mentioned earlier, the legacy issues. When you see people there, and there's, a terrible phrase, the usual suspects. That whenever it's an important case, there is the usual suspect. And I think that it's fantastic that they're there. So you have Kevin Winters, mentioned Phoenix Law and Darragh Mackin, and the Low and Beatty's another person who's starting to build his profile now that he's in his own practice. I think those people are fantastic in terms of pushing things on, and it doesn't. It doesn't bother me to see a competitor, if you like, on the TV or in the media, because that they are experts at what they're doing. They're pushing the thing forward, and I'm doing it in JMK in one area of the law, they're doing it in another, and I think they're all making a positive improvement. So I think those are Northern Ireland, those are the people that you see and you want to encourage. I think wider than that, in the UK it is it's always good when you see people that you don't know of, but definitely it's the smaller issues that I think are making a big difference, because those are the things that really mean things to people. So I think there's ample scope for us to move activist lawyers into the other jurisdictions to
Why not?
have lots and lots of interviews and highlight the issues, and back to what we talked about, it's about owning the phrase, owning the concept of being an activist, and making the law work for people instead against pretty fierce opposition. Yeah,
and it's interesting because all of our guests have had very unique kind of interpretations of what that means to them, depending on their background and their area of work. But the question that we always ask them, and we'll ask you the same question, is what is that relationship between activism and the law, if there is one, and do they work well together? Do we need it?
Well, I think it's that thing is that you can. I suppose it's that thing that depends on the issue, but there are small changes you can do. But I think it's the. I think the reality is that the law has to be used, because there's only so much, lobbying you can do if you're faced with, an opposition in control who are going to use that for their own ends, and I think for example, the B word, the Brexit word, taking away the ECJ from the as an avenue of where we can go as citizens to complain about what our own country is doing. The presumption that your own country will never harm you is simply wrong, and that we needed to have that outside court, someone who we could refer things to and say, hang on a second, they may be in charge, but they are not doing the right thing, and they need to be called to account. So I think that's where you always have to have it, and it's a pity that has gone. And the idea of taking back control of your laws mean that you're now more open to abuse. I think that's a terrible situation, and I suppose we have to to hope that we can continue to use the law, and that the laws are there allowing the public to push back on these things. And one of the difficult things is always going to be funding of the actions, and funding is taking away your funding is something which is a great weapon on the other side. But we have to work to maintain the funding, make sure that people have that access to justice, and that the opportunity. The opportunity to change things at the ballot box isn't enough.
No, it's not. It's not. Huge challenges ahead. And like the past few years, we don't know what 2023 is going to bring. I think you and I had a recent chat just about my naivety in terms of you always think, no, it's, that person's not going to get voted, that won't happen. And then it does. And then your heart sinks that little bit further and you're thinking, Why? Why on earth?
Well, I think when you look at things, and when you are passionate about things yourself, or you have an understanding of things, and then what I can't understand is how so many issues are so thin, evenly divided. At the time of speaking, there was just that election in America, the Senate election, and and you think it went between. It was something like 50.8% to 49 point whatever, and you just think, how is it that close? No. How can there be that many people who are thinking that's the other? I appreciate that's a wage issue, but it's like it's how can having messages of hope and equality be not be accepted,
just lost with those figures.
That you think how could 50% of people think it's not good to have more help for people. And it's just at a time of crisis. We'll continue to be bewildered by those outcomes because I expect nothing will change. But as you say, if we have the law there, and we need to make sure that what we have at least remains in some way, so that we can use it as a tool for activism, as a tool to make change. I think it's like the immigration that you're involved in is a classic example of how do right wing regimes take a hold. It's by picking on someone, and we're in the cliche of that again. And you think, how are we all in that again?
In a crisis, and that's it's just to be expected almost. But difficult times, and a busy time for lawyers as well. For the year ahead, and I look forward again to another year of.
Absolutely, and I think we should, I suppose, take the opportunity to I'll interview you back about your experiences of the
I'm not very interesting. That's why I sit on this side. I don't.
Well, did you think you'd get the 50 episodes? Did you think you'd get the 5?
I did not. I absolutely did not. So Jack, that a lot of our listeners will know, he's off traveling around the world and all the rest. We started here. Our first episode was just him and I talking, but we had scripted it and we practiced it so much. And that took us a long time. So I never really thought that we'd get to the stage where, it was a much more relaxed setting where we bring the guest in. And it's just been an absolute pleasure to meet everybody and to learn about their work. And sometimes I'm lost in thought, which is why I have to remind myself, no, we have to move on to the next question, because I'm really intensely listening to their journey. And I have to say, you really appreciate people who share their honest, journey, and nobody's been here saying, it was an easy journey, I became a lawyer, and this, it's really, really been eye-opening to learn about, the difficulties and challenges that people faced.
Well, I think that's good, but it's like if I met one of the guests at, out at a social event, you would have these types of conversations and maybe talk to them. But if you don't have that opportunity, you never learn about them. So
well, Jonathan, we might have a social event for Activist Lawyer coming up.
Good.
So keep your ears open for that one. Hopefully in 2023.
But I've been very happy to see and to hear, so I should say, the difference in yourself. As the episodes have gone on in terms of the confidence and I think I've even denied halfway through this, but you had a little bit of that at the start.
I did,
and then. You can really see as you were getting into the flow of them that they were working very well. So I think you should be proud of yourself of what you've achieved.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity, and our fantastic studio. Everyone's so impressed, and Jessica, of course, who nobody's met. I think she showed up in one of our episodes, but she has just been absolutely fantastic in terms of editing and producing and doing the artwork. She does everything behind the scenes.
Well, I think that again, that's in a post-pandemic opportunity as well. That she's no longer physically with us, but from the other side of the world is that managing to do this all for us.
She gets to hear our lovely voices. She's sick listening to us in Canada. But well, look, thank you so much for joining us in your studio. And we look forward to the year ahead and working with you on our themes and our guests, Jonathan.
Thank you very much. I look forward to starting listening to the new series when it comes out.
Brilliant. Okay, so thank you everybody for joining us for the last in this season's episodes of Activist Lawyer. That was Jonathan McKeown, who took us through how Activist Lawyer, the podcast, really came about. A little insight into maybe how we plan to develop the podcast. Well, we didn't really give anything away, but we look forward to 2023 and having more guests, more themes, and as I say, building upon this platform to share the fantastic work of our colleagues and practitioners in human rights law, in criminal justice, in public interest law. It's just been fantastic fantastic to have their insights. And we're really grateful for your feedback. We're grateful to all of those students as well and graduates who have been listening and getting in contact with us. They've really found it beneficial to find out more about this interesting, rewarding, and tough area of the law to work in. But we hope we have provided you with some useful insights and information to help you on your legal journey. I'd also like to say a big thank you to the team here at Granite Exchange. We were missing Jack for the last part of the year. He is having a lot of fun down under, and hopefully he'll join us at some point in 2023. And I want to say a massive thank you to Jessica, who edits and produces the podcast all the way over in Canada. She does fantastic work. And to the team here at Granite Exchange, who make everything so easy for any of our guests and anybody who joins us here in our wonderful studio in Granite Exchange, the Granite Podcast Studio. Please also check out our website, because we do have some merchandise there that you might be interested in for a gift for family or friends or your colleague, for activist lawyers. And even some gifts for budding activist lawyers, as I think there's some baby grows there as well. So check out our website for the lovely merchandise on sale, promoting our podcast and activist lawyers around the world. So I'll take this opportunity to again say thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to sharing more episodes of Activist Lawyer in 2023. Happy Christmas, everybody, and a Happy New Year.
This podcast was recorded in Granite Podcast Studio. Interested in starting up your own podcast but don't know how? Granite Podcast Studio can help. Record your podcast in our state-of-the-art studio, which is based in the heart of Newry City. Our studio has cutting-edge and user-friendly technology and can seat up to 4 people. We also provide an editing service for our team, using your guidance and editing notes to provide you with a flawless finished product, leaving your listeners wanting more. For more information on how you can get started, visit www.granitepodcaststudio.com.